I'm Samantha Baldwin. I can't talk about, as many of you know, I can't talk about my case or what's going on. But today I'm here with Jon Wedger and also Vicky Ash. So we've all known each other for some time now, and there are certain circumstances in our lives that have brought us together. So today we're going to be talking about a number of issues that have affected each one of our lives. Mainly to do with corruption and Vicky will talk about what's happened to her and the obstacles that she still continues to face, and Jon will also share. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have already heard Jon's story, and we'll hear from him as well. So Jon, would you like to just kind of give a bit of a summary of what you've been up to?
Yeah, I mean, as people know, that I'm a police whistleblower, and that I spoke out over the corruption and the deliberate cover-up of child prostitution. And I know people get hung up on that term, but it is what it is. And this isn't a seminar in semantics. You know, that's what was happening, you know. And then subsequently the bullying campaign. And it was at that point, as I've sort of stated on many occasions, that I really felt the force of this cabal that people really, they sort of even now fail to sort of accept goes on. And then their deliberate attempt to silence me and crush me because of the damage I could potentially do. And that's what was said to me, you know, you're going to F the police force past, present and future. And as we see, as time's gone on, that has been the case. Now, what we're looking at now is probably one of the biggest sex scandals of the past 2 centuries, really, with Epstein and Prince Andrew. You know, and so if the government can cover that up and the media can cover that up in collusion, then what else will they do? And really, when you see the power that they wield, you know, they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. And this is what was a testimony to what I went through, and I know what you've been through, Sam. And so, I mean, my campaign continues. It just evolves. I know we're getting a lot of support from America now. A lot of my work's gone out to America. And one of the things that I never started out looking at, and I did have some experience in it, but not to the magnitude I have now, is the ritualistic abuse, you know, whether it be satanic or indigenous beliefs, such as the Jamaican had the Obia and Santeria and the Voodoo, and there was certain Central and West African beliefs. And even if we look at countries like Benin, which is 70% voodoo still, you know, so it's there, and that is the sort of thing that I ended up sort of being drifted into, and I started then meeting a lot of people that are victims of what we would term as SRA, satanic ritual abuse, and I've just seen the damage it does, you know, and it's given me a deeper understanding of humanity, really, and you know, and one of the things, and this is something I want to say, is that I get attacked for this, and in many ways I'm happy because I've got such an ingrained staunch belief in Jesus, and I'm not Bible punching, and I was brought up a Catholic. I've sort of turned my back away from the Catholic faith, but when I see what Jesus stood up for, the suffering he went through, and the fact that he did everything to protect the children. And there's power in that name, and I have seen it in there, and that is what has led me towards yourself, Vicky, and via an incredibly brave guy called Wilfred Wong, who's one of the probably most in the Western world, the most premier sort of Satanist investigator that there is, and a wealth of knowledge. And he sort of showed me the reality of it, and it ties in very much with the work I was doing with the children, and it sort of ties in with the accounts that I heard in the past but didn't fully understand, but the accounts that I hear now of people, and it is a reality. And it's when they go on about, I'm not ranting on, I'll pass over in a minute, but I have people say to me about the police, the corruption, and they will say, it's the Masons, it's the Freemasons, Jon, the cover up of the Freemasons. And I'm going to say now, no, it isn't. And I'm not defending Freemasons, I'm not backing up Freemasons, and I'm not a Freemason, I don't believe in it. The only secret society we should be concerned about and not be fearful of, but fight against, the Satanists. It's the ultimate secret society. It knows no colour, creed, monetary background, or anything, you know, it unifies across every strata of society.
Absolutely. And they're all saying the same thing, you know. How can children in different parts of the world all be saying exactly the same thing?
And also when it comes to an adult putting a testimony out, and let's look at the statistics, you know, in order for an adult of child sexual abuse to get a conviction on what is deemed a historic case, and again people get hung up by that term, but I'll just say it as it is, you've got a 2% success rate. Gosh. Now that's not to say that you can't succeed, because I did incredibly well. I had a 75 to 8% success rate within a 2% parameter. You know, if you want gold, you dig for it, and it's all down to the tenacity of who's dealing with it. But that just goes to show how it is stacked against people standing up. And again, that's not to say that 98% of them are innocent, because they're not, you know. And I would say out of all the cases I dealt with as a police officer with child sexual abuse, when it comes to interviewing the children and getting their testimonies, which were obtained under very, very strict parameters, we had one case out of the hundreds we dealt with, one case in which a kid was lying.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, on the whole, kids don't lie.
No, they don't.
You know, and I know the uphill struggle that there is, but that doesn't mean that we give up.
Absolutely.
On the contrary, the opposite, you know.
Absolutely, so. Yeah. And Vicky, what does this, you know, you know a lot about because of what happened to you as a child.
I think as well, recently the thing that I've been speaking out about is obviously we've had the situation with the missing dossier of Geoffrey Dickens, who was my MP in Saddleworth, and he asked me to go on Panorama with him in the early 1990s. And what I'm noticing is happening is the same pattern of silencing people who come forward. And I remember when I was going on Panorama, being warned off of going on Panorama, that if I ever went on Panorama, they might try and murder me and the children. And I remember saying, well, who? And the reply to that was, well, I know it goes on, but it hasn't happened to you. So I was warned off from going on Panorama. Needless to say, that didn't stop me. Going back to having faith, as Jon said, I believe that even to be sat here this day, to be speaking out as I am, this has been a journey that has gathered momentum from my first disclosure to where we are now in the present climate. It has just, you know, God defends the truth, and the truth will always win, and we've no reason to be sat here talking about this subject if we've not got something in common to be discussing it anyway. So that was one area. Also, when I was taking my abuser I was going to go to the police about my abuser, I was also threatened that if I ever, by a top solicitor, that if I ever took my abuser to court, I would end up in a mental home. And I'm realising that a lot of people that have disclosed are silenced and are either in mental homes or sectioned or serving even prison sentences. You know, I think of the case of Melanie Shaw and what she's enduring, and there seems to be a common thread that I'm even questioning. And also, when I was speaking out, I was threatened that I would be taken to social services as an unfit mother. Well, I think that everybody who knows me now, all my children are grown up, that I would like to think I'm certainly not an unfit mother. But that was a threat at the time. So that concerns me, that there seems to be a thread of silencing people. And we know that fear is that thread. Grooming is used in abuse. Grooming is used, mind control, hypnosis is used in satanic ritual abuse. And it's that mind control that keeps people silenced and even forgetting what's happened to them.
And drugs as well. Yes.
Oh yes, definitely. I've spoken about that before on a previous interview of drugging. In my case, I vividly remember as a child that I woke up and I saw Daddy Longlegs all over the wallpaper. There was not a space between the Daddy Longlegs. And that's such a vivid memory. And I know to this day now that within satanic ritual abuse, they use hallucinogenic drugs to drug the children. And that is one of the symptoms of hallucinogenic drugs. So everything has been a jigsaw in my life of understanding what happened to me as a child. And now it all makes perfect sense. And I believe that God defends the truth and will always defend the truth until it's all out in the open.
So you go back to what you said about drugging and about hallucinogenic. And so a woman got in touch with me. She was from Hampshire, and she was groomed as a young teenage girl by a pastor at her school. She went to a boarding school. And he took her on, convinced the parents, who were Christian, that she could get pastoral care under his guidance, and he was pimping her out. And he was drugging her, and she didn't realise she'd been drugged. She'd been used as a prostitute until she saw pornographic magazines of herself, and she ended up with a lot of venereal diseases and things that couldn't be explained. But she said she was out cold, so she didn't realise, because they were drugging her. They were raping her, they were photographing it for magazines as a young 14-year-old girl, but also for film. I think the film had just come in with the videos. But she said what happened then was it moved further. She said, whereas the pastor, the priest that was the pimp at this private posh school in Hampshire, this was in Hull. She ended up being taken to Hampshire because she was sold to another pimp who paid more money. But she said the drugs were used then. She would hallucinate. And she said the reason she would hallucinate was because they needed her half lucid, and it was for satanic rituals, and it was all in the New Forest area of Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And she said the problem I've got now is I've got memory recall, but they're intertwined with rabbits jumping about because of the hallucinogens. She said, so how can I give a statement to the police? Yeah. And then you get people jump on with the false memory syndrome and everything else. And you mentioned about Melanie Shaw. And we've seen it with the recent trial. Now, I'm not defending this guy, and it's Carl Beach, and I want to make that clear because Carl Beach has got a questionable criminal history involving child pornography, and in no way am I supporting that at all, and I want to make that clear. But let's look that a lot of people that commit crimes against children have been victims themselves, and that is how it is. I'm not saying that people that have been abused go on to do it, because that is not the case. But when it comes to people that do commit them, most of them are victims, and I think they found out that near enough with satanic abuse that people that have been abused in satanic rituals, 100% of them have been that go to Satanists. A majority of them have been abused as kids as well. So, but Carl Beach has just gone to prison for 18 years, so that's not shy of a life sentence for perverting the course of justice. So I can't tell you the exact statute law that he was convicted under. However, in my doubt, there is no doubt that man is a victim, and that man was telling the truth. And I heard it from good authority that his investigation team, I know they're getting attacked now by the independent watchdog about the child abuse inquiries, believed him. Now I believe him. I believe that guy was telling the truth, and that he was a victim of a celebrity paedophile ring or whatever it is. However, they brought in a bit of legislation in 2003, and I do speak about this a lot, and I think it got pretty much overlooked, but I want to really sort of say the relevance of this. This was the Criminal Justice Act of 2003, and it was brought in that people with what they call bad character, and it was seen as a bit of a revolution when it was brought in, because there was a big public outcry about burglars that had 10 or 20 convictions getting not guilties, and then their convictions were being read out in court and everyone was aghast. Well, this man's just lied to us and got off with it. So they brought this legislation where they could actually mention previous convictions in a trial, and it's trial changing. But that had a real sinister twist, because if you shoplift and you get caught shoplifting, that is a crime of dishonesty. So in legal terms, in a Crown Court trial, you can be classed as a person of dishonesty. Now, when that word is mentioned, you just think liar. Yeah. You don't think shoplifter. What you don't think is that person's a shoplifter because they're supporting a heroin addiction. They're supporting a heroin addiction because they've taken heroin because it's an analgesic, which dissolves their pain because they were sexually abused as a child.
Exactly.
And so when this person then comes forward in later years, which they knew was coming, to disclose that they had been abused in the various care home scandals, which we never had in the 70s or the 80s or even the 90s, but we get in droves now because they've all been shut down and everyone's died. That's why they're doing it. And the Catholic institutions and you know, the local authority institutions and everything, where it was systemic institutional abuse and pimping out of children. So when they come forward, very, very damaged, hurting people that have been self-medicating all their lives and then ended up, by no fault of their own, drifting into criminality, albeit minor criminality, they get then legally tainted as being dishonest. So as soon as their testimony is given out, dishonest. Now, Cole Beach ended up getting involved in child pornography. To what degree, I don't know, but I know he got convicted of it. But that was alluded time and time again. What wasn't mentioned was, you're attacking him, let's attack those that are accusing him. And these are various MPs, which, again, we can't name. One of which has got convictions against young boys, and that wasn't highlighted in the court. You know, and again, it's a way of tainting someone and manipulating public opinion to demonise that individual when really they're the victim. And as a result of what happened, not just with Melanie Shaw, with Sabine McNeil, who spoke out against the Hampstead satanic abuse case, and I was asked my opinion on that as well. And then we've seen Cole Beach. We are getting victims too scared to come forward. They think they're going to go to prison for speaking out.
What would you say to those people who are thinking about coming forward? What advice would you give them?
And Vicky just mentioned the word fear. Yeah, we've all been scared, and I know you have, and you have, and I have, and unfortunately, Sam, you can't mention it. And it's even, but
I can honestly say that I'm not scared. I can honestly say now that they can't do any more to me than they did to me as a child. So, you know, to me, you know, the damage was done a long time ago. And, you know, I want to reiterate that all the symptoms I had of, you know, various symptoms that I had of a lot of fear. I mean, if anybody can ever find the Panorama interview I did with Jeffrey, I'm a totally different woman sat here today than I was on that Panorama programme, because I've come through my journey and I've come through into healing.
What year was that Panorama went out?
It was 92. I think it was 1992.
So Panorama, and I know that Breeze Media did put out an appeal for anyone that had footage.
Yes.
And I think there was some footage did come forward.
Yes, but I you know, I know that I'm obviously a lot stronger now. And you know, the truth makes you stronger. You know, when you face the truth, the symptoms that you had, that you're running from, I mean, often addiction, where you see people taking drugs, or it's escapism. It's escapism from deep trauma. You know, I'm sure that if you go into many mental health institutes, you'll find that there are a lot of people that have had a lot of trauma as children. But once you deal with the root, rather than just medicating people, once you deal with the root, I know a lovely woman, Carolyn Bramhall. She runs Heart for Truth, where she helps people with dissociative identity disorder. That used to be called multiple personality disorder, and that is a known disorder where people have fragmented as children to be able to cope and survive with the dreadful trauma that they've endured. But once you deal with the root of the problem, then you come through to healing, and that's where I am today, and that's why I can speak out. I know that everything that I've disclosed, I have people that stop me in the street that say, goodness me, everything that you were speaking out about 30 years ago is here. I've had people come up to me when people say that Satanism doesn't exist. I mean, that's absolute rubbish. I know of a coven that meets regularly once a month at the local village. I've heard of people bumping into a coven all dressed in cloaks locally. I've also been approached by somebody very well known who says how big it is in this area. We only need to look back at the Moors murders of Ian Brady
Well,
and Myra
it's
Hindley
the same locality,
in Saddleworth, and you know, you have to ask yourself the question: why would people do that? Why would they have? You know, and that's really what I'm doing is bringing this jigsaw together, is asking those questions alongside other people as what is actually happening in our society. How are so many people in high places? How are they actually? It's coming out that they're paedophiles. What is the thread that is linking this together? And that's the question that I think we're all asking.
Well, it's soon unravelling, but I mean, when you mentioned about what would people do, and this is a bit of an appeal, and I always have an appeal, come forward please, and we said about fear, you know, I nearly lost everything, and I was so close to losing the whole lot, but I stood my ground, and it did come through for me. Unfortunately, there's others it doesn't come through. There's people that do succumb, and there's a lot of suicides as well. And we can't forget that. But my fear blends into insignificance when you consider the fear of a child that is being hurt.
Absolutely.
So really, man up, be brave.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, they have done it to the 3 people who've been mentioned, but they can't do it to all of us. They have tried. And when you said about, you got mentioned in Panorama, I was in Parliament. We was in front of the Minister for Policing, which is Douglas Hurd's son. We had members of the Home Office there. I was with a girl called Vanessa, came with me, and we had a Cabinet Minister and a former Police Minister in the same meeting. And he actually openly declared in that parliamentary meeting that he generally feared for my safety. And he said,
Really?
if I hadn't have helped Jon Wedger, I don't think he would be sat here today. And I said to him, do you think they would have done that? He said, I know they would have done it, Jon. You know, so it is a real threat.
Yes.
And it does. And I spoke with a guy that was head of covert operations back in the 80s in Central America for the CIA. And he said, why haven't they killed you? And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe God's got a plan. I don't know. And I said, would they generally do that? And he said, yes, they would. And
but what's my favourite saying is that evil only prospers when good men do nothing.
Of course, yeah.
And as a Christian, I like to say that the devil only prospers when God's men do nothing. And I believe as a Christian that the battle's already won, but we need to press in. And I always say as well that even though this is not a palatable subject, I'm sure that we would rather be sitting around this table talking about something far nicer. We must think of the children that it's happening to, and also I'm a survivor that has been very fortunate to survive with my family intact, with with what I believe to be a very credible story. And I think of those people that haven't made it through like I have, and if I can be that voice for one person to make it, then it's been worth it.
well, they rely on silence. They work by covert methods, and they work with silence.
Yes.
And their biggest weapon is our silence.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is.
And we need to speak out. And
Yes.
and if you look at how change has come about, you know, when laws have been repealed, and even with the Slavery Act being abolished and things like that, it was by people standing up and being brave and speaking out.
Yes.
And we will bring about change.
And let's hope with the ICSA, with the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, let's hope that with all those people coming forward and this database, let's hope that more and more people are actually speaking out on this subject of satanic ritual abuse.
And it's quite simple that those that actively oppose us, and they do actively oppose us, I'm not just saying that people might be ignorant to this and not understand it, and then, you know, they think, oh, it's a load of nonsense. You know, I had one crime commissioner said it was all bunkum, and it was just because he was ignorant to it. But those that actively go out their way, and it does happen, and it happens with the people within the national media as well.
Yeah.
The question has to be asked, why are you opposing this?
Yeah.
Why are you putting all your energy into silencing us when young children are being ritualistically sexually abused? Why on God's earth are you not backing us and actively going out your way to destroy us, with the hope that we'll top ourselves, and if that doesn't work, they'll do it for us? You know, so we've got to draw the parallel at that, you know. And
that's not been my experience, actually. I remember a police officer that was in the first investigation of my case, and in recent years, she actually said to me, your voice has been heard now, Vicky. We didn't know it existed then, but now we do. And that there apparently is training within the police for satanic ritual abuse. And also, I know somebody who's high up in social work, and they too are trained in satanic ritual abuse. So that it doesn't exist actually isn't true. It does. And
I've seen a list of dozens and dozens, I think nearly 30 cases in recent criminal history of convictions of satanic abuse.
Yes, well, I also went down Dennis Wrigley. He's now passed on, but Dennis Wrigley was the leader of Maranatha. I actually went to the House of Commons with him, and I actually saw a document.
Can you tell us what Maranatha is?
Come Lord Jesus, but Maranatha means Come Lord Jesus, but it's an international Christian ministry.
Okay.
But he was very involved with what was called trumpet call. So if things were going on within the law that wasn't upholding Christian law, then we would write in and but really, I did this bit, but leader of a Christian ministry. But Dennis Wrigley asked me to go to the House of Commons with him, and I actually saw an actual case there where a man was serving a 10-year sentence for ritual abuse. Now, that didn't actually hit the local papers, but I've seen that. And we also have the person that was actually serving a sentence for that ritual abuse, their stepson has actually spoken out. And that all linked with Cyril Smith and Rochdale and abuse that was going on in Rochdale. So all this seems to be a jigsaw that's coming together.
And we've seen the same areas being mentioned again. Rochdale got mentioned with the recent uncovering that was done by Maggie Oliver, and then you've got Rotherham as well that's cropped up. And it is, and the funny thing is that there was a book written called Dances with the Devil by Audrey Harper, a former Satanist who openly admits that she's drunk a young kid's blood. And I've heard that from a couple of people now, that they, part of the ritual, that they are made to kill a baby and then drink the blood. And she then was used, because she was a prostitute on the streets of London, used to recruit children for sex parties. And that ties in exactly with what the children were telling me when I would interview them. The children that were on the streets were saying that they were being picked up and taken to sex parties. Really? But they never got involved in satanic rituals, but they were used to sexually satisfy cover members, because that is what they like doing. And if you was to make it even broader, I think that anyone that has sex with a child is doing an evil act anyway, whether they hide behind Satanism or they don't. It's evil and it's wrong.
Yeah.
And we absolutely know now, the climate and the extent of child trafficking with drugs and even the recent programme on taking drugs for fun, and even at the root of that is child trafficking. If we don't actually wake up to the climate that we're in, then we have a very, very dark future. And we really, really need to stand up and make a difference in protecting children.
The media are aware, because like I said, a guy said to me the other day, but why don't we read about it in the papers? And of course that's their only narrative. Luckily we have got this medium now, social media or the new media as it gets termed, that we can put out our own narrative, and as long as it doesn't get abused, let's hope it continues. But I've sat down with a journalist and assistant, what they call them, editor for the Mail on Sunday. I sat down with the assistant editor of the Sunday Times, with the Sunday Express, and I've been interviewed for the Sun, the Star, and the BBC. And I spent half a day with the head of current affairs at BBC. And what was said to me, and it's especially from the Mail on Sunday, the guy said to me, John, we know that Leon Britton was a paedophile. He said that to me. And also the guy in current affairs said the same. He said, yeah, we know, we've heard it all. We have heard it all.
Well, also, when I went to actually visit Dennis Wrigley, before he died, actually, he said that Leon Britton's secretary had actually applied for a position with him because of Leon Britton's behaviour. She wasn't happy working for him. So again, all these things that seem to be showing a picture. I always say there's no smoke without fire.
Yeah.
Because it affects global politics, and it does. See, so what you have is that people like Leon Britton, due to his liking of young boys, which is what he had, he could be bribed. Sorry about that, there's a bit of door banging. And, you know, and we've seen Putin has referred to the British Parliament as being a paedophile parliament.
Yeah, satanic paedophile.
Satanic paedophile
it's
parliament.
run by satanic paedophiles, that was also
and we saw what happened in Kincora, where, you know, the paramilitaries were gaining information, and so the British government were for, you know, the unionist terrorists out there. I did an interview with the lovely two brothers, the Blair twins, who were in Kirkcaldy Kids Home, a Catholic run, where the IRA were complicit in pimping kids out to get information out. So kids have always been used, and we've even had it with well-known gangsters that were involved in using children for their own means, and we saw it with the Cray twins' involvement with Boothby and Drysdale, how there was sex parties and all that, and which so they've been used to manipulate, and that's why the police are then used to gatekeep this information. And what you'll find, police is heavily compartmentalised, so it's not just your Bobby on the beat will have no understanding that this goes on. He'll only deal with a kid who's run away from a home. He'll have no understanding. He's actually got no liking to go and talk to a kid and find out what's going on anyway, which has been proven to be the case. It's only when it goes to specialist units, and if you have got coppers that have got a heart, which on the child abuse cases you tend to get that, but they're so overworked, and most of us were heavy drinkers as well, you know, we were worn out and flushed out. But then when you realise, like I did, what was going on, and you report it, you find out who these coppers are that are put in place to deliberately keep the lid on this. And we've just found it from the ICSA, the Independent Investigation into Child Sexual Abuse. Government set up inquiry, whether people love it or not. Do you know what? It doesn't matter. No. If it gets the information out there, so what? It's getting criticised. But do you know what? Stop criticising people for coming forward. Yes. Criticise those who don't come forward. Yes. Those that are paid a good wage and a job to speak out and protect, criticise them, not us that come forward. Yeah. You know, they say it's the nail that stands high that gets hit first.
And also it's easy to have your opinion when you're not doing anything.
Of course it is.
You know, it takes a lot of courage to come forward, and it costs.
Yeah.
It costs to tell the truth. It costs your reputation, especially in an area of abuse. You know, unfortunately, through the shame and feeling guilty or condemned, because as a child you are not at all responsible. Anybody who has been abused is not responsible as a child, and that's the first thing. That anybody who comes forward, you are not responsible for the abuse that happened to you, and the sooner that you disclose that, the sooner you've taken that step into freedom.
Well, the blame lies with only one person, that's the abuser.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
unfortunately, what we're seeing now is they're putting the blame on the victim.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are actively seeing that.
Yes.
And we are not just seeing that in the Crown Courts, we're seeing that in the family courts as well.
Yes. And that's double abuse. So not only have you been abused, but actually when you come forward to get the help you need, you're being abused again, which is complete violation.
I mean, what I must say is that the kids go into care sometimes because the parents, the caretakers can't look after them. And they do 80% of the abuse does go on within the home. However, with that, the Children's Act has this they call them secret courts, but it's not. They're just controlled courts under the Children's Act, and it's sterile. You know, so if it's in a Crown Court under that Act, you're allowed there's no public gallery, and you're only allowed 2 vetted members of the press in there. You know, again, so the information doesn't go out. But in the family courts themselves, you know, they're a secure little unit, and they cover it. And I've spent 4 years in and out of the family courts. And I've seen how awful they can be, how horrible they can be.
Do you think judges in family courts have a good grasp on child sexual abuse when perpetrated by a parent?
Some do and some don't. And there's a lot of snobbery as well. There's a lot of the judges that look down, and I could tell you this, that there was one that was presiding over one of the family court hearings that I had to keep my boys, and the mother lost her children because she had severe problems, and she did. And actually she didn't fight it, she actually did in the end relinquish and pass over. But the woman judge was so vile to me, it was appalling. However, we had a male judge that was really good, and years later I met him in a Crown Court in a child abuse case. He was presiding over a Crown Court and actually came up and spoke to me about it. And he had a heart, and he was a good guy. I wish I'd know his name, because I say his name because he deserves a round of applause. The female judge that was presiding for 2 years, she was a vile individual. A vile individual. She was absolutely horrible, and I just thought, how many lives have you destroyed? And there were snobs, absolute snobs. But you get that with investigating officers. They're snobs, they would look down, and there's been quite a few high-profile cases where the police officers were so snobby that it caused the death of a child, and Climbier was one of them. One of the female officers didn't want to take scabies home to her children, and the baby P, there was a lot of that involved with that case as well, and I was involved with the baby P case. And what the case of the child vice that I was on, I actually took a young girl into care one night that was on the street, 14 years old, working as a prostitute on heroin and crack, and I was told to get rid of her because she had scabies and that she would infect the car and it'd need cleaning. And that was the reason. So these things, so sometimes it's not corruption, it is incompetence, laziness, and snobbery is the police officer's biggest fear. However, the level that I took the investigation to, there was corruption. And I made allegations of corruption, and that got covered up. And then it got covered up higher and higher and higher and higher. And I did get recognition from that from Parliament, just said, you know, that you're lucky that you're still here. So when it gets to the nerve, they will come after you.
Do you think sometimes it makes it worse if you make complaints about, like, police conduct?
It depends on what level, but there's someone that I'm helping at the moment has done exactly that to a local police station in London, and the officers that have been used to come in to bully her, and they've actually tried to take her young son off her, and they self-contain it. So for her it's massively devastating, because the local command unit, whoever's in charge, has been involved in this sex parties, that's what it is, gay sex parties, and she's been attacked for speaking out, making allegations. However, they're keeping a lid on it because they want to keep their little cabal going, and they're frightened and they're scared. And that's what I say, these people that try and crush us, they're doing it because they're scared. They're absolutely petrified of us. They don't want us speaking out.
Well, there is another common thread that runs through all this, is the vulnerability, that they prey on the vulnerable.
Of course. And always
so you've got the issue of, as we used to call them, the orphanage children, or children's homes, disabled, homeless. It's always the vulnerable, additional needs. It's the vulnerable end of society that are easier to groom, and that's a common thread throughout SRA.
You mentioned something earlier, Vicky, and I want to bring this up because you said about threatening you with a mental institution.
Said that if I would end up in the words were, if I ever took my abuser to court, I would end up in a mental home.
Now, there's a lady...
And that actually came from a solicitor, which I would have thought that was perverting the course of justice for a solicitor to say that to me.
At the very least.
You wonder why.
What's behind that?
Now, we can bolster that up because both Sam and myself know a lady who did exactly that. She spoke out. That's Sue, and Sue doesn't mind being named. And God bless you, Sue. And Sue is a staunch campaigner for the abuse that went on in the Beach Home children's home in South London, and you keep going, Sue, Sue, Moira, and Alan Merritt, and they really are raising, the profile. Now, Sue had caught a member of staff having sex with a younger pupil, at the school, and it was a boarding school for the vulnerable. She spoke out because she's a brave woman, and they went and institutionalised her. They put her in a mental institution, and of course, then a lot of them die there.
It's just shocking.
And if we look at a thing called geographical profiling, you could see the collusion just by the geography of it. So years ago, you had courts, magistrates' courts were built next door to police stations, so it showed how closely they were linked. They did the same with children's homes. Children's homes were always built next door to mental institutions, so that was a rite of passage. And the abuse continued in the mental homes.
And yet, isn't it funny that, when you stand up in a court of law, you actually take an oath on the Bible to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And yet these days those oaths don't really seem to be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
Well, let's look at the amount of religious abuse, how many priests hide behind the name of Jesus. I mean, really, that's disgusting.